So what is $100 worth in hi-fi today? Not emotionally, not nostalgically, but I mean like literally. If you're starting from zero, that is to say you don't have a system, you don't have an amp or a DAC, what can $100 get you? Or what should you spend your first $100 on? So I think because once upon a time, $100 meant some compromise. At least you might have been able to pick up a pair of headphones, but more than likely you weren't going to be able to get a DAC or a separate amplifier along with that. So I think that with this video, or rather what this video is really about, is about the $100 mark and trying to meet that demand. So $100 used to mean entry level as far as I'm concerned. Now, there was a time when $100 used to buy you access, but perhaps not performance. You might have been able to buy a pair of Sony MDR 7506s, but you weren't going to get a separate DAC along with that. You might have been able to buy some entry-level Sennheisers, but again, no amp or no DAC or no EQ and no tuning. You know, just essentially a cable and a driver and some hope. So I think if you wanted more, you were going to have to climb that ladder of headphones and DACs and amps and sources. So, you know, in that sense, when we think about hi-fi traditionally, we think about it being a modular, incremental, and also rather expensive hobby. So today, I think $100 is very different, because today when we spend $100, we're not just getting the sound. Because today with $100, we're able to buy sound, but we're also able to buy DSP, wireless connectivity, noise cancellation, app-based tuning, and things like multi-point pairing. I think that there's a fundamental shift happening here. So instead of really asking these questions like, are these good IEMs? I really want to ask the question, how do these stack up? Or, or is this a good first $100 or a first use case for your $100? So I think that because your first $100 really defines the relationship that you're going to have with music. If you're coming into this and you don't have headphones, but you want to buy headphones, right? Then whatever you buy is going to immediately define your relationship. So, this purchase is going to decide whether or not you want to listen to music casually or intentionally. Are you somebody that wants to chase gear, or do you just want to chase the experience? Are you somebody that just wants to sit down and listen? Or are you somebody that wants to carry the music with you? I think that for a lot of people, this is the only $100 that they'll probably ever spend on audio. And I think because of that, the bar is set very high here. And there's so many options on the market. These guys retail for around $100. So on paper, these guys look almost unfair because of the amount of features that they have. These guys are a triple driver design, and they're compatible with Bluetooth 5.4. They are compatible with LDAC, aptX, adaptive, as well as aptX lossless. There is a hybrid ANC feature on here, as well as them being multi-point pairing. Now, SoundPEATS rates these for 37 hours of continuous use, 7 hours on the individual IEMs, 37 on the case. And so I think like 10 years ago, this would have sounded like satire to be going out there and buying a music listening device and to have all of those features. The real question I think then becomes is like, what are we actually getting for our money here? Now, when we talk about the build quality here, these guys are $100, and that's important to kind of set the tone. Having said that, these don't feel like a $100 afterthought. The earbuds here are really nicely sculpted, and they're very comfortable, and they're very well finished. These do not feel disposable. They feel very intentional in their design. You can certainly go back even 10 years ago, and the thought of being able to get a really well-crafted, sculpted earbud like this, I think at this price point, again, was something to be unheard of. I think that that's something to commend here when we're talking about the build quality at this price point. Now the case here is a very plastic case, but it is very solid feeling. The hinge here is very well put together, and I feel very confident in this build quality, right? And I think that this is going to hold up to kind of everyday use. I want to talk about the battery on these guys. So I think that the battery is kind of one of these things where this modern audio kind of quietly wins the game, because this guy has 7 hours per charge. So essentially the case inside of here has a battery, and this will charge the earbuds themselves when they're dead. So the case itself is supposed to give you 37 hours of charge, and then individually, these guys will get you about 7 hours of charge time. In my experience, I've not had any issues with the battery life. In fact, I haven't really charged these but one single time. And that's about a whole week's worth of like on and off listening, probably across a good 5 listening sessions or more, and I still have roughly 70% battery life on the case. What kind of battery life you're going to get may vary, but in my instance, I've hardly even had to think about charging these things, which is a really cool feature to have. And you know, kind of a complaint with a lot of these battery powered devices that we carry around in our pockets is at the end of the day, I now got to plug in like 10 different devices before I go to bed. And then when you forget, it's like, oh no. Now, one thing to note here is that this guy does have fast charging. And so I think you'll be able to get, I think what it's rated up to like 2 hours worth of battery time from like a handful of minutes worth of charge. So I think that for $100, this is very frictionless listening because there's no cable needed, there's no amp pairing, there's no power planning. It's literally just the music and the convenience factor of the form being this really small, compact package. And if the compact package really isn't enough, then I want to talk about the software layer of these guys, because SoundPEATS with their onboard software is going to add a whole other layer of value here, because the software, you know, it's not flashy software, but it's very functional. And what you're going to get with this guy is EQ presets, a whole bunch of them to select from. And then in addition to that, you're going to get a custom 10-band EQ. One of the things that's really cool here is there's 3 different modes that you can select from, being an ANC feature, which is like an adaptive noise canceling feature that's going to use the onboard microphones of this device to help cancel out outside noises. The second feature you're going to get on this guy is what's called transparency. And transparency is just going to use the microphones on these to then pick out sounds you know, going on in the environment and then reflect those sounds back to you. Then there's just a standard normal mode. Now, what's really interesting about these is that with the ANC, when I'm out walking around in the street, this is when I'm getting the most dramatic shift in sound when I switch between these. And so with that software, you're going to get these kind of 3 different modes. And then in addition to that, you're going to have EQ features as well. Now, I think that this is a really important feature to have because traditionally speaking, you know, tuning hi-fi is something that is very expensive to do. But with these, you're going to get all of that baked right into this device. So in like some sense, you know, having a device like this with the software-based features on it, you're going to be getting almost a better user experience from something like this than, you know, you might be getting from, say, a separate DAC and headphones. Now, when it comes to the sound, it's a question of like, how do these guys sound? Well, for me, they sound good enough to matter. They're nice, they're warm, they're full, and they're surprisingly spacious as an IEM. Now, I think that the low end here is very confident and something that can sometimes be a little too excessive, but I will also say that it's very easily tamed with the onboard EQ. When I listen to jazz and particularly with these guys, I was really, really vibing out and enjoying it because, you know, I spent like a whole day just jamming out to Coltrane, Dave Brubeck, Miles Davis, and I was really enjoying my time with these. Now, is this an emotionally convincing listen? I think that the answer is yes. And for a first $100, these are a really good benchmark. Now, the trade-offs here, which, you know, I want to honestly talk about this, but nothing at $100 is free. Touch controls are my biggest complaint with these guys. Now, that's supposed to be a feature that is welcomed, but I think tapping sealed IEMs up against your ear canal when these are completely pressurized in is something that I don't think is very comfortable of an experience. In fact, it's something that I'm very worried about because having this thing sealed in your ear and tapping this, you know, that's essentially transferring all that energy up against your ear canal. So You know, I think the touch features here are a nice idea, but in practice, they're not something that I'm ever going to be using. And that's just something to think about. So, you know, what are our other options? I think if we're real here, for $100, you could buy a pair of Sony MDR 7506s. You could also buy, you know, a used wireless headphone. You could also get just a budget DAC or a used amplifier. But I think none of those things are going to be a complete system. Now, you can buy the H3s and that will give you a full system. So they're going to be the source, they're going to be the DAC, the amp, and the headphones, and they're going to be this all in one package. So the real value proposition is in that convenience factor, and these being able to provide you the full range experience right out of the gate. So the real takeaway here isn't just about replacing hi-fi, it's really about entry points. So I think the SoundPEATS H3 aren't a destination, but rather a doorway. So if you're looking to spend your first $100, and if your first $100 gets you good sound, control over tuning, portability, consistent daily listening, then that $100 I think has done its job. So conclusions here, and really what does $100 mean now? Well, $100 no longer buys you perfection, but it can buy you engagement. And that might be more important here because the goal of hi-fi isn't necessarily the gear. The goal here is to listen to more music. And I think that if this is where someone starts, then they're starting in a very good place. Okay, guys, this has been Nick with Nick's Listening Space, and this has been the SoundPEATS H3 review. If you guys enjoyed this review, or there's another pair of Bluetooth or other IEMs that you would like me to review, please leave a comment down below. So, yeah, thanks so much, guys.